One good day can't make you, and one bad day can't break you. This especially applies to scale fluctuations. I'll explain. First, it's important to note that there are roughly 3,500 calories in 1 pound of body fat. So if you gain 2 pounds overnight, that would have meant that you would have had to eat 7,000 calories over your calorie maintenance, which you probably couldn't even do if you tried. So why does the scale fluctuate? There are many reasons. Sodium, alcohol, constipation, medication, diarrhea, eating earlier, eating later, the time of the month, stress, are all just a number of reasons why we can fluctuate. Let me give you an example, and I'll use sodium. For every gram of sodium we consume, we hold 2 pounds of water, this being because your body needs to balance your electrolyte levels with your water. So if you were to eat a packet of beef jerky, for example, that typically has about 1,500 milligrams of sodium in it. That will mean that you will hold 3 pounds of water just by eating a packet of beef jerky. And other concrete numbers to go by are carbohydrate. For every gram of carbohydrate you consume, you hold 3 to 4 grams of water to create glycogen. Alcohol makes you hold a lot of water. It's a really big mover the time of the month. You gain about a pound roughly when you start your cycle. All these things are very normal. Now let me give you an analogy to finish communicating this concept in full, and then at the end of the video, I'll explain ways that you can accurately track your fat loss. Alright, so in this analogy, imagine that you got a brand new telescope and you're using this telescope to look up at the moon and you realize there's a smudge on the moon. Why is there a smudge on the moon? Further, you keep looking, you realize, oh no, there's no smudge on the moon. There's just a smudge on the lens of the telescope. That's why it looks like there's a smudge on the moon. Picture the scale this way. There's no, when we see the scale bop up and down on a day-to-day basis, this is not a change in your body fat mass. It could be, but it's likely largely a change in temporary weight, right? There's a difference between the reality of the thing and the way we perceive the reality of the thing. There's a difference between the reality of the moon and our means of perceiving the reality of the moon. If I have the smudge on the telescope, it doesn't mean there's a smudge on the moon. It's the same with the scale, right? When you see this number change on a day-to-day basis, keep in mind, the scale doesn't just tell you changes in body fat mass. It tells you changes in literally everything within your body, right? And a lot of the day-to-day stuff is fluid. It's temporary weight, right? Changes in muscle mass, even like your general connective tissue, bone mass, all this stuff you're not going to see on a day-to-day basis. Changes in body fat mass, even if you're losing 1 pound of body fat per week, that's something like 0.12, 0.14 pounds per day. You hardly see that. So when you see these big changes on the scale, know that it's largely just changes in water weight and temporary weight. And if you ever want to know how to accurately track changes in your actual body fat mass, I'll explain that right here. There are 3 ways to specifically track changes in your body fat mass. First is just looking at the calories as it relates to your calorie maintenance. I'll explain that in more depth in a second. Second is measurements. Third is photos, and I'll explain those in a second as well. So for the first one being calories, the way you want to do this is look at the calories as it pertains to your calorie maintenance. This being your calorie maintenance, by the way, guys, is just literally a term to describe how many calories your body requires to support all your functions. Breathing, walking, talking, working out, all this stuff requires calories, and calories are just a form of energy. We know by the first law of thermodynamics that energy cannot be created or destroyed, so you require a certain amount of energy each and every day just to live and do your thing. If you eat more than this, you store the excess. If you eat less than this, you take from the excess which you have stored. And this is where it's helpful because you can roughly break it down into numbers to see where you're at in terms of changes in body fat mass. If you're eating in a 500 calorie surplus daily, you're gaining a pound of body fat per week roughly. If you're eating in a 500 calorie deficit daily, you're losing a pound of body fat per week roughly. The second thing will be measurements. You can do measurements and literally just measure your arms, your waist, etc., to see changes in your body composition. Keep in mind, this is a pretty good way to track where you're at, but bloat can really affect you. If you're very bloated, you can easily have an inch or 2 of distension on your midsection. So keep that in mind. If you're bloated, it can throw things off. But generally speaking, measurements are good because you can see certain areas changing while other areas are doing different things. For example, you could be gaining inches in the quads because you're gaining muscle, but you could be going down in inches in the waist because you're losing body fat. We hold more muscle in the thighs than we do in the waist. This is why it makes sense. So measurements are also a good way that you can track changes in your body fat mass. And the third and final method of tracking progress is progress photos. The beauty of this is the human eye can just see everything. It's pretty straightforward. You capture a moment in time, you compare it to another moment in time, and you look at one photo to the other. Oh, I see the waist is looking a little different. Oh, I see some fat loss here. And you can see fat gain, you can see fat loss, you can see muscle gain, muscle loss, you can see bloat, you can see all of this stuff in photos. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a million other ways that you can track progress. These are just very easy, straightforward ways to do so, and you can use them all to compare. So you're not just now using the scale, which can throw you off a lot, but you're using the scale, you're using measurements, and you're using progress photos. And lastly, when using the scale, you can make it a lot more accurate if you weigh in daily. This way you can track trends and weed out fluctuations. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, liking, commenting, and sharing would mean the world to me. Thanks so much and have a great day.